Okay, so certification credentialing. So much is tied up in this idea of becoming a credentialed coach. And the ICF has gone on to simplify things, but there's still a lot to know, and there's a lot of reasons why you should start to keep abreast of what is happening in the realm of certification and credentialing, because things are going to start to move swiftly. So I joined Coachville in 2007 as a student, and credentialing wasn't really at the top of mind for most people. And it wasn't something that was being talked about. Very few people asked about credentialing. So it wasn't one of the most important things when it came to business building, but a lot has changed. And so that's what I am really here to talk to you about. So I want to come at it first from my perspective, because I've been involved in business development for a really long time, branding, marketing. And so from the business end, there are a lot of reasons why credentialing is really important. And the ICF is doing a lot of research and surveys. Every year they're doing awareness studies. Right now they're in the cycle where 2019, they did the huge global study. So on 2020, we'll know the results of that. Some of the things that I'm going to talk about today came from the 2016 study, but the trending is pretty significant. So the awareness studies, though, consumer awareness studies are happening regularly. And so I want to talk about that first, because I think from a business perspective, this is so important. So it used to be that no one even asked about credentialing. But as coaching is growing and companies like Google are talking about it more and more, and it is very quickly replacing management classes in the corporate world as a way to grow leadership and management, the credentialing landscape is changing very significantly. And it was interesting for me because I was really surprised by these numbers. This 2017 Global Consumer Awareness Study that 83% of the people that responded, and these are consumers of coaching, saying that it is important or very important that their coach has the credential. It used to be that coach training school credentials meant something. That is changing also. And the truth is, when someone enrolls in Coachville and they ask me about the Coachville credential, I tell them it is just really something to honor their completion of the school. It's something nice that we do for students, but it does not have the weight that the ICF credential has. And the ICF has done a lot to bring the ICF credential into the international limelight. So at this point now, 180 countries are acknowledging in the coaching community the importance of the ICF credential. But when you look at that number, 83% of those that are responding to this consumer awareness study, that number was even higher than I expected. And that was really surprising to me. So for this particular webinar for all of you, I have spent in the last 2 weeks a lot of time with ICF leaders. I spent time with the COO, the assistant director, the director of marketing, the director of public relations, the director of research. And I'm in this every day. I'm talking about coaching every day, but 83%, that was significant. And there are some other trends that I expected, but were never quite confirmed until I started to really interact with the ICF in order to give you all the most up-to-date information. But that's a worthy number, 83%. And, from a business perspective, that one fact alone should start to help you all to understand how this landscape is changing quickly. I remember when I was a student in 2007, my general manager of the school at that time said, "Don't become a credential chaser." Very soon, credentials are going to be more important than ever. But let me just continue this thought process first. So these are the numbers right now for the amount of people that are internationally calling themselves coaches or coach approach leaders. So 64,000 in the coaching continuum, which is pretty significant. It's a little smaller than I thought, though, but 64,000. And the reason why that number is important is because I want to show you the numbers of credentialed coaches within that group then. So these are the ICF credentials that are available. The ACC, which is the Associate Certified Coach, that's a beginning level certification. 16,465 coaches. The PCC level of certification, which is Professional Certified Coach, is 10,836 coaches. And then the super elite level, Master Certified Coach, less than 1,200 in the entire world. So 1,150. We're looking at a little less than half of the coaching continuum actually being a credentialed coach, but this number rises so quickly. So every month the ICF gives the ACTP schools like Coachville the current statistics. And it wasn't that long ago that there were only 900 MCC coaches, and it was only maybe 4 years ago that the PCC was under 6,000. And so when you're thinking about business building, branding, and marketing, the fact that these numbers are rising so quickly should give you pause if you are not a certified coach. And it's from a business perspective now, why certification becomes so important. If you are going to continue to compete in a market that becomes more credential heavy and more well-known. So just a little statistics to get you really moving, but this ICF 2015 global study is really hitting you where it counts. Higher reported revenue sources, higher fees, and more clients annually. And this was in 2015, so this was one of the statistics that I was very interested in finding out about for this new study. So they would actually not give me numbers because the research is still being compiled. They're still in the analysis of it. It will be released in, I believe, February or April of 2020. But what they were willing to share with me is that these numbers have grown and pretty significantly. And so higher reported revenue, higher fees, and higher number of clients, all with certification credentialing. And so I just want to put a pause here for a minute when it comes from ICF perspective and just give you a little of my experience. So I have been, again, in this field since 2007, actually. Technically, that's when I started training, but I was doing business development and startup consulting for much longer than that. So this particular statistic or these statistics, I live and breathe coaching. I talk to coaches every day. I became the general manager of Coachville in 2010, the CXO of Coachville in 2014. And in 2010, when I was general manager, this wasn't even in discussions. But in 2014, when I took the CXO position, I wanted to know more about this. And the ICF was in the process of gathering the questions that they were going to ask for this global study. When I talked to them about the questions and the things they were most interested in finding, this was at the top of mind. So this fell maybe as number 3 as one of the most important things for that particular study. In the 2019 study is the most important thing they're asking about. So when we find out all of the results in 2020, I think that we are going to see a significant trend. So when it starts to impact the amount of people, the kinds of people, the kinds of organizations and corporations that you can actually work with, then credentialing takes on a whole new level of importance. And I am I'm known in the world as a rebel. I have a very non-conventional view of seeing the world. So if anybody's going to rebel against something like credentials, it's going to be me. I helped create a pop culture phenomenon in the world, and we broke every business startup rule that existed. And that was School of Rock, and there's a major motion picture, an Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, a Nickelodeon television show, and 165 branches based on let's break all of the rules and do something different. However, and because of the trends that I am seeing, even though I am the ultimate rebel and I think that people should do things differently and see the world differently, this revenue trend is significant. There are a couple other things that add to the reason why when someone actually calls Coachville, they are told from the beginning, credentialing should be one of the most important things. It should be something that you are 100% geared towards. If you're choosing an ICF school, you should complete it and get your ICF credential. We are constantly telling our students that. And it's not just the revenue, although this component is really important. It's not just the higher numbers of clients, and it's not just the satisfaction levels of those who are coaching with credentials that are important. But these things, when it comes to someone with the business background that I have and the brand background that I have, these are very important. So let me just continue on. So again, coaches, managers, or leaders that are hiring coaches, individuals or organizations are now expecting their coaches to be certified or credentialed. And these numbers have changed too. So we are getting close to 80% here, which again, that is so different than even just 5 years ago. And so when we start to look at what are your options now when it comes to getting yourself out there in the world, and when you are spending the precious time that you're spending marketing, reaching out, connecting with HR, cold calls, you are now at a disadvantage without the credential. And it used to be, again, you're going to hear me say that often, that I would say to people who were asking me credentialing questions, is it important? I would say in credential heavy fields, I would say 100% it is. So the medical field, if you want to work with attorneys or lawyers, and if you want to work with children in any capacity, those were the organizations that were consistently requiring credentialing. Now, when someone asks me, I say, if you want to be able to have some of the most amazing opportunities that exist out there, I highly recommend it. And our numbers for credentialing at Coachville have changed significantly because of that and because of the environment that we've created. I mean, it used to be less than 50% of the people that came to Coachville achieved certification because it just wasn't important then. And we actually personally check in with all of our students to see where they are and to make sure that they are moving appropriately to this particular space. So we make sure that they graduate, and then we ask them once they achieve their ICF certification, will they please let us know? And I did a poll in a recent Coachville class to see what the general idea was, and it was the first time in a Coachville class where 100% of the people in that class were absolutely ICF certification minded. That has changed significantly too. And this is why. Resistance to certification still runs deep. And I have noticed that it runs deep more with experienced coaches than people brand new to coaching. So when experienced coaches come to Coachville, there's a reason and there's a lot of resistance. People who are new and considering coaching as this is their first entry into coaching, I would say at this point now, 80% of them are already certification minded. So I understand that most of you are out in the field already. So you may fall into one of these arenas. So fear of testing and oversight, complicated application and record keeping, time commitment, financial investment, and knower's mind. So I want to talk about fear first, because when I'm out coaching in the world, this is my specialty. This is what I do. So what I hear from most when it comes to experienced coaches in the industry is the worry around having to learn a new way, but also the coaching knowledge assessment test and the ICF's requirement of a recorded session. One of the awesome things about Coachville, and a statistic that I'm incredibly proud of, is there's not been one single student in the Coachville environment, unless that the caveat is someone hasn't told us, so they're not, if someone has kept it or has not been honest with us, everybody that has taken the coaching knowledge assessment test has passed. So outside of that caveat of someone not being fully truthful with us, and we're really proud of that statistic. And that includes students who have English as a third language, and they are taking the test in English. So there are two requirements with the ICF, and that is Coaching Skills and Knowledge Assessment Test, which is a 180 question, multiple choice, online open book assessment that is comprised primarily of ethics of coaching, definition of coaching, and ICF competencies. So Coachville students are very well versed in that space. And we have mentor coaching. Mentor coaching is to prepare people not only to be really masterful coaches and to get all their questions answered and to have them be able to talk out case studies. I'm actually the mentor coach, and I make sure that every student has a really firm, deep, and comprehensive understanding of ICF competencies. And I have a very interesting perspective. Coachville has an interesting philosophy that I think might differ from some schools. We are consistently training our coaches at the MCC level. And it is because everyone, if they are willing to go to the deep spaces and be in the direct places, are very capable of hitting that MCC number. But fear keeps people from the MCC. It's an elite status right now. I'm also proud of the fact that in the last 6 months, we've had 3 Coachville students successfully achieve MCCs, and that's just in the last 6 months. There are only 1,150 on the planet. In the last 6 months, 3 of those 1,150 were from us. So if you were to decide to go for credentials and you came to Coachville and you went through our ACTP program, or even one of our starter program, just to accumulate your first 60 hours, you still get mentor coaching, and we make sure that you're ready. It is a little unnerving, but we try to alleviate that through mentor coaching and practicum, so you're really prepared if you decide to do this. So the fear piece is always when you're entering new territories, especially if it's a new territory in a space that you've spent a lot of time, can create a lot of resistance. I'm hoping all of the other statistics that you're learning today around how it impacts your revenue and the opportunities that you have will supersede this fear piece. But the one thing that I can say about the environment of Coachville is it's incredibly warm and welcoming and an amazing community. So our students are constantly connecting to build each other up, to practice and support each other in the achievement of credentials. And so that is also one of the things that I love most about the environment of Coachville. First as a student, when I was a student, but now also as a leader in the school. And so the application and record keeping, ICF had a notorious reputation for this being really complicated. And I'm happy to say that I have simplified things significantly. So the application is done all online. It is really simple, and you can actually stop in the middle of it and save it, which was something that was not an option anymore before this. So the reputation is 100% difficult. They're hard to get a hold of. It's too hard to understand. They've changed that, but also the Coachable environment gives you a very clear roadmap. Do this, do this, do this. And if you have any complications, reach out. We'll tell you exactly what to do, and we will support you in it. The record keeping is not as challenging as most would think. You have to log a certain amount of hours for all the credentials, 100 experience hours for the associate certified coach, 500 experience hours for the professional certified coach, and 2,500 experience hours for the master certified coach. They're not asking you to give the time of every session and the topic of sessions or anything like that. Record keeping is pretty simple. Name, contact information, the span of time that you've coached with them, and whether it was paid or pro bono. And actually that record keeping has become even more simplified, because now in order to follow all of the privacy rules that were enacted in Europe, you keep that and you are attesting to your hours only, and they choose people to audit and request records for. So complicated app and record keeping is a historical resistance to certification that is actually no longer a reasonable resistance. And the ICF, I applaud them for changing that, because that was, as a general manager, one of the hardest parts of what I did, was help our students to understand what to do and how to do it. That's changed, so I would even take that off the table. But the reputation isn't changing as fast as the changes they've made. So I just want you all to know that. So the time commitment and the financial investment, I feel like those are one and the same. What I hear from coaches that are out in the field is, I'm already doing this. I'm busy. I'd rather spend that time marketing. I'd rather spend that discretionary income on marketing and getting myself out there. Those are reasonable reasons to resist certification and resist stepping into a whole new environment if the numbers are not what they're showing now. I mean, we are topping 83% for satisfaction levels for certified coaches. We're nearly at 80% for requirements of certification. I can't give you the percentage right now of the amount of revenue, but even within the Coachville environment, I see a very significant difference between what our certified coaches are doing once they are alumni versus those who are not. And so just know that the trend is changing. And then the final piece, this was me in 2007, 100%. I was ultimately an epic knower's mind human being. I only wanted to interact where I thought I knew the right answers. I always wanted to be the expert. I didn't want to be challenged. I had this really significant background with School of Rock, so I thought nobody could teach me anything. I was pretty great at building something from nothing. There aren't a whole lot of people on the planet who can say there's an Andrew Lloyd Webber musical based on something they created in the world. So I not only had knower's mind, I had an insane amount of bravado. And I don't have that anymore. And in large part due to my mentor. My mentor, Lance Secretan, who you heard about in my bio, is consistently ranked as one of the top leadership experts and the top leadership coaches on the planet. And he has changed what I even think is possible in coaching, because he's coached countries like the Czech Republic, cities like Louisville, Kentucky, the way it exists now as an art town and a destination town. That came from coaching with Lance. He coaches people like Microsoft and Humana. Sam Walton was his client when Sam Walton was alive, of Walmart. And so I met Lance in a very odd way. I was doing mentor coaching, and this man who was in his 70s, and when I met him had written 19 books on leadership, I became his mentor coach because he decided to get ICF credentials in his 70s after working with all of these remarkable organizations and humans. And I became his mentor coach. So here I am, it's 2012. I'd only been a leader in Coachville since 2010. I am now the mentor coach of one of the most significant coaches on the planet. And I was blown away by his presence in the room. For our first class, you could have combined the remainder of the class, which was 9 other students, and myself, so 10 of us. You could have probably combined our experience and understanding of coaching, and we still would not have touched what Lance had done at that point. And he came with the most open, learner's humble mind that was so extraordinary for me. And it was the beginning of a very significant change for me. So I do have a lot of experience. I run one of the largest, oldest coach training schools in the world, and I am very aware that there is so much I do not know, so much I have to learn, and so much I could be better at, or I could practice mastery towards. So if knower's mind is stopping you, I would ask you to spend some time with that. Because the transition from knower's mind to learner's mind now, after I've spent this amount of time, 9 years as a leader at Coachville, is one of the number one changes that impacts how successful a coach is, both in coach training and outside once they are an alumni and out in the world. It is that transition from knower's mind to learner's mind that changes everything. I know there's so much I still need to learn. I learn something every time I teach a class, even if it's a class I've taught 100 times. So if it is knower's mind, I would ask for you to step outside of that for a little bit and see what else there is to learn. One of the reasons why there are only 1,150 MCC coaches is because it is a level of learner's mind that is extraordinary. I have just completed my MCC recordings, and so I will be submitting after my transcripts are complete. And I spent a lot of time researching MCC coaching. I interviewed a lot of MCC coaches. And what really challenges knower's mind is this about MCC coaching. When you listen to a master certified coach recording, there are times where you have no idea who is the coach and who is the client, because the level of reciprocity and equality in that recording is stunning. And as I start to really step into that kind of coaching and that kind of openness of learner's mind, what is happening with my coaching practice is pretty phenomenal. I am becoming an exponentially better coach because of it. Okay, so this is the requirements for the certification levels: 60 hours of training and 100 coaching experience hours, 100 hours of 125 hours of training and 500 coaching experience hours, and 200 hours of training and 2,500 coaching experience hours between the levels of certification. ACC is the most widely held credential, and it actually is an appropriate credential for most organizations that are asking for credentialing, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. These are the testing requirements. And so if you go for ACC, you will require a submission of a recording, but that's to the ICF, or you complete an ACTP program like Coachville. The same with a PCC. There are portfolio routes and coach-specific training hours routes that you can submit. And then the recording goes to the ICF along with the transcript. Or if you complete an ACTP program like Coach Will, we vet your recording. Actually, I'm the person that listens to every recording that comes through Coach Will, and I am the person that determines whether or not someone achieves their certification. So it goes through me. And then there is no bypassing the recordings to the ICF for the MCC. You submit 2 recordings, both have to be MCC level, and both have to be stunning. I've spent a year doing my recordings, and now I feel like I have what I need to be one of that 1150. Okay, oops, sorry, clicked on the wrong thing. Okay, so as I said, we had 3 graduates certify in the past year. It was actually the past 6 months. We actually have enough electives and an audio library so that at Coachville, there's enough for 200 hours of education. And that's part of our ACTP program. Thomas had a desire to always make coach training both generous and affordable. And so we have stayed with that as part of our key principles and values, and we will always be that. And so there's a 1,000-hour audio library that allows you your 40 hours of self-directed training for MCC is in that, and we have elective classes. So my MCC hours were all complete at Coachville, but also the environment of mastery. I am constantly asking our students to step into that MCC level. When we're in practicum, I'm telling them what is the difference between what happened and MCC coaching. We just want our students, even if they're not going to submit for MCC certification, to be coaching at MCC level. Okay, so your business may depend on it. I'm not a big fan of fear in any kind of webinars, but things are changing rapidly. And when I had a meeting with the assistant executive director, I was a little astounded at what I heard because my state came up in this meeting. So I'm in Pennsylvania. And so one of the reasons why an ICF certification is important now is because the ICF grandfather clause. You won't find this on the ICF website, but I made sure that I asked every single person that I talked to at the ICF if any legislation or regulation goes down, will ICF lobby for the grandfather clause? And they will 100% do that. And that is something that happens when a field goes through the growing pains of legislation or certification, regulation, is whatever is the gold standard self-regulating not-for-profit is usually the one the legislation or lobby or regulation goes with. Sometimes it's an acceptance process. Sometimes there's a testing into it. But at this point, it's risky to not have certification because of what is happening. So let's talk about that. One thing is I have coaches calling frantic for coach training because they get an opportunity with an organization or a company and there is a requirement. We would love to have you, but we're requiring coach ICF certification. So how fast can you get that if you don't have it? And there are coaches frantic in order to accept this awesome opportunity. They are calling and saying, how fast can we make this happen? So that's important. So your business may depend on it for that reason. And I've had the opportunity to coach with some really remarkable organizations like the Mayo Clinic, the Boys and Girls Club, the US Navy. They all required not just certification, but PCC level certification. So there was no way I would have had them as my own private clients without that certification level. And so there's going to be more and more opportunities that are like this that are going to require it. But also regulation and legislation is now no longer an if, it's a when. And so there's been a recent case. It's the first I've heard of. The ICF didn't even know about it. I told them about it, so they're going to research it. The coach was not an ICF coach. She lived in California and had a practice. It was a health and wellness practice, and she moved to Florida and opened up her practice and was sued and shut down. So she was not an ICF coach. She went to the Integrative School of Nutrition, and they told her that she was able to do coaching. She was not able to give any kind of information about nutrition or health or wellness in that coaching. She could, however, do it for free. And that went to court, and the state won. And so she lost the ability to do what she was doing in California, in Florida. And so the trend has also changed in 2016, where 52% of the coach practitioners are actually saying they would appreciate regulation. I am one of those coaches. I used to be very much against it, but because there are so many internet marketers out there in the world calling themselves coaches, if legislation and regulation happens, or when it happens, that group is suddenly just going to fall off the face of the earth as competition for us. And all of the coaches that are actually doing real coaching and making an impact with organizations now rise to the surface. And we're not just couched in this din of mediocrity and baloney, quite frankly. And so I am one of the coaches that are hoping that legislation happens. So these are the states to pay attention to. So if you are not paying attention and you are in this list, you want to start paying attention. California, Texas, New York, and Florida have been pushing towards legislation for a while now. When one of these states, and these are sort of the test run states that typically are the ones for legislating or regulating something, when one of these goes, the other three will follow very quickly, and they set precedent for the rest of the world, especially if it's California. And then Pennsylvania is where I am. So Pennsylvania, there was recent discussion around language, accredited credential and certification. And so some boundaries were tested. And also there is some understanding between what is psychology and what is coaching that needed to be cleared. So having an ICF credential here also is really, really important. And because, again, it's a matter of if, not when. It's a matter of when, not if. Let me change that. So ethical coaching, marketing, brand, revenue, mastery, and business practices are really, from my perspective, the top 5 reasons why certification is important. But this actually came from Coachville students and alumni. It is their perspective. I asked a large group of them for you to see what their thoughts were, because I'm in leadership. I have a different perspective. So I wanted to see what our current students and our alumni were thinking. And they are right in alignment with my views on why credentialing and certification is so important. Sets us apart, the understanding of methodology and repeated success, the elite and professional status, the revenue numbers, the mastery, and what level of depth is coming out of the Coachville environment, the kinds of coaches that are coming out of the Coachville environment, and then business practices. If you are in one of the states that, and by the way, these slides will actually be on the Patina Nation Coachville page if you want to check them out, I would start now. And because you don't want to be in the place where regulation or legislation happens and all of a sudden you have to scramble to catch up. That would be lethal to a practice. If you are in a state where there are a lot of certified coaches already, you are going to lose out and it's going to be swift. And so again, I'm not a fan of the fear-based webinar in any capacity. But these numbers and the states that they're talking about surprised me so much. And the ICF has actually really swung into action for this. So ICF chapters all over the country, so we're going to speak specifically about the United States right now, actually have regulation and legislation ambassadors now that are watching what's happening in that state. There's a manual that the ICF shared with me so that if something starts to happen, they have grassroots people on the ground to start a grassroots education of those that are trying to change our industry. And so the ICF is fully prepared for this, and I feel really good about that. To me, that's the number one reason. I would not want my practice to be shut down because all of a sudden my state wants a new revenue source and they think that regulating coaching is the way to do it. I don't want to lose my practice that way. I don't want to put my practice on hold that way. And so that's really, really important. Okay, so I have active links in these slides. So Patina will send out the link. Patina, I think, has it already listed. And so you can actually go get a copy of these slides. The active links will take you to some of the ICF pages that are important, like certification apps, links to ethics, links to competencies, and links to ICF studies. So if you want to check out these consumer awareness studies yourself, it's all right there. That's it. Okay, awesome. And I completed that in exactly the amount of time. So I want to stop. I just threw a whole lot out at you. And some of it's that fear-based, like you should do this now. So I want to pause and see if anybody has any questions.
So much, Deanna. That was excellent and very informative. We have a couple of questions that have already come in. If you guys have any other questions that you need to ask, feel free to plug those into the Q&A section now. So the first question is, are any of Coach Phil's offerings live and in person? I know you spoke about the electives and the audio library, but are all of yours virtual?
So all of our classes are virtual. They're all done by a very dynamic teleconferencing system called Maestro. And so it counts as live synchronous training, which is what original certification hours need to be. And you dial in by phone, so you can take class from anywhere in the world. And actually, it's an international school, so our 2 p.m. classes have a lot of international students. And the advantage of actually doing it that way is we're looking to have in our school really busy people doing awesome things in the world. Really busy people rarely have time for live in-person training. And so this allows people to come in a way that fits their schedule and supports people making things happen out in the world with their own practices. What I really love about this environment that I wasn't prepared for as a student is the sense of community that's created on these calls. So it's not lecture, it's Socratic method. You are in a discussion with a lot of interaction with your fellow students. And real friendships and relationships are formed. So when I was a student, I made some of the best friends that I have. They do not live near me. I've traveled with them. I've seen them. When things happen to us, we call each other first. Like when my father died, I called my colleague and friend Nancy right away. And when her father died, she called me. And we've only, up until we became very close friends, met on these calls. And one of the things that I'm proud of is this community. It is remarkable. It has been an enormous support system for me when I was a student. And then I'm also proud of right now our longest travel so far for a Coachville student to meet someone that they met and practiced with in the Coachville class is from Stockholm, Sweden to the Midwest. So that was Stockholm, Sweden to Utah, actually. The travel was 100% solely so that the two students could meet in real life and spend more time together. So although it's by phone, it is so rich and so dynamic, and it is a really supportive, awesome community.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Deanna.
You're welcome.
Another question that has come across is, what are some tips to opening yourself up to have a learner's mind before you begin training?
Holy cow. So that's a big question. I would like to tell you all that it was just an easy, smooth transition for me. That's actually so far from the truth. And so this is something that I share with my students. So for me, I was so much an expert mind that I need the universe to take a very heartbreaking baseball bat to my knees for this to happen. And so I'll give you some tips in a moment, but it didn't happen for me until my partner was diagnosed with cancer. And I had to let go of all facades and all bravado because I just didn't have the capability to deal with being a caregiver and being an expert mind at the same time. So that's what it required of me, but it was life-changing for me. So I met Lance after the cancer diagnosis, and he came in with that humble nature. And I was in this very challenged space. And so his energy was even more impactful for me because I was no longer able to just keep put on airs anymore. And so it was significantly life-changing for me to just be in the company of someone with such rich experience. And he used to be the CEO of Manpower. He was the person who really changed and turned around Manpower. So this man has a wealth of understanding and knowledge in the world. And he was so humble, it was stunning. And so how to transition from that mindset would be curiosity. And curiosity is an answer to a lot of expert mind, but there's a lot of fear behind it. So what I have learned now is expert mind is really just self-protection or self-preservation. So the deeper place is to look at what are you afraid of? That's one of the things I learned in the Coachville environment. The reason why I coach fear now is because I had to address my own fears in school. And I learned a lot about my own patterns and where they came from. And that was part of my transition also. But be curious about why you are moving into that expert mind. So I've gotten really well versed in my own fear. And it still comes up. And I know it's coming up because the second it comes up, so say I meet somebody out in public, they could be a potentially awesome client, but something about them intimidates me. I have an unusual background. I didn't go to business school. I went to art school. I used to work in the rock music industry and design like stage clothing for Alice Cooper and Motley Crue. And, it's just this weird little trajectory that took me to School of Rock and marketing and PR. So when I first came to coaching, I felt very out of place. And I have grown so significantly, but still, if someone intimidates me, as soon as I start talking with a person who is doing that, I know it because my bravado comes out like so fast. I don't get to know somebody. Immediately I'm telling them, oh, I started School of Rock. Do you have an Andrew Lloyd Webber musical after something you've done in the world? I get a feeling in my pit of my stomach. I know right away, oh, here we go. Expert mind and fear is making me present this person who, that component is true about me, but that's not what I lead with when I am not in this fear space. So first know that expert mind comes from self-preservation and have judgment-free awareness with yourself. There are beautiful things to learn about yourself because of fear. I no longer look at fear as an enemy. It is a close personal family member of mine. It will be with me forever. There's something I learn from it every time it comes up, and that allows me to grow. So understand expert mind is usually based in fear and self-preservation. I have to prove, I have to assert my value, and so that leaves me no open space to learn. But start with curiosity. what can I be curious about here? What can I learn from this person? What can I learn from this space? And that will start to open up the landscape, but just be clear that underneath is self-preservation fear. And if you start to play in those spaces, you're going to learn a lot more about yourself, and you will stop leading that way. You will stop seeing the world that way. And life changes in very significant ways. And, I was an expert mind. I was a knower. I never let anybody in. I was never vulnerable. If I was feeling uncertain, if I didn't know, if I was feeling vulnerable, no one knew those things. And I am exactly the opposite of that now. I journaled grief live on Facebook. I am in a month that can be really challenging for me because today is actually the anniversary of my partner's death. But instead of being that person who holds everything in, I actually embrace learner's mind, and I write about it and I talk about it and I put myself out there. And it is because of those things that I get to work with the people that I do. It's because of those things that I get to work at Coachville. Learner's mind opens up a lot. Start with curiosity, but understand fear is underneath it all.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing, Deanna. I think that will be very beneficial for those going into training for the first time. We have time for one last question, probably a little bit less in depth.
Yes.
However, it is, if I have an EMCC certification, what can be leveraged with that when seeking ICF accreditation?
So it depends on what the certification is. So EMCC, tell me what that is.
EMCC, we will have to get that. That came in as one of the questions.
Okay. So I'll give like basic facts. So the ICF, if that certification actually included coach-specific training that was marketed solely to coaches and no one outside of the coaching field. It didn't matter if people outside of the field actually take the classes, but it's only marketed as a coach-specific class that could actually be used. So there's transfers in. So we can look at what training you've taken and we can transfer you into the ACTP program. And with an understanding that the ICF vets these classes heavily. At this point now, if someone's coming with transfer classes, they meet directly with me because I've become an expert at what ICF will actually accept and what they will possibly vet and what they will 100% know on. So there is the possibility to transfer classes into an ACTP program, which impacts the amount of hours that you have to take. It also impacts the amount of money that you spend. And but it has to be 100% live synchronous training. So it can be by webinar, it can be by phone, it can be live, but it has to have interaction. So it cannot be just a lecture. And it has to be coach specific only. And you cannot be taught other things in that classes. So like nutrition classes or anything like that. And then that can transfer into an ACTP program. It's on a case-by-case basis. And every transfer in, again, meets with me. And I help determine what the ICF will accept and what they won't. And I'm very, very honest about this is borderline. I'm not sure. If you can get some proof that this actually maps with ICF competencies, and you want to show that to me, then I will give you my call, but the ICF may actually challenge it. But there's a lot that is accepted, but it does have to fall into those parameters, which is live synchronous training, marketed to coaches only, and coach-specific training only.
Great. Thank you so much, Deanna. It was wonderful having you on today. I know everybody appreciated everything you had to share. If you guys would like more information about Coachville and what they have to offer, you can visit the Patina Nation page on Coachville.com and join for no cost, join their book club, take a class, and be able to listen to recorded coaching sessions. We thank everybody for being on it and have a great day.
Thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure.
This has been a presentation of the Patina Nation. To watch more content like this or for more information, please visit us online at www.patinanation.com.